You have to be mindful of your energetic frequency at all times. A potent truth from my dear friend and sister, Cherie Aimée. Join me and Cherie as we dive deep, and I mean deep, into a conversation about timelines, energetics, and sovereignty. This is Cherie's second time on the podcast. If you missed the first episode, please hit pause now and go listen to episode number 237 first, because in that episode, Cherie shares more of her story, which will serve as great context for today's episode. In this episode, tune in and learn how you can begin understanding your true role during this time in human civilization, the three different realms that we are currently living in, what it means to live within different timelines, the real reason why you may be feeling so depleted these days, a potent distinction to clarify who's really here to serve and support you versus who's really here to use you, and what it really means to be a sovereign being in today's world. Cherie Aimée is a creative strategist and founder of Authentic Awareness Initiative. She is also a cancer, near-death, and heart transplant survivor. Her personal story went viral on social media with over 5 million views after her featured TV guest interview on NBC with Megyn Kelly. Cherie advocates for self-leadership and the rebirthing of the aligned creative spirit. All of the teachings she shares have guided her in becoming a globally recognized speaker, thought leader, and creative visionary. With the launch of her business, Cherie guides visionary leaders on an inner quest to awaken the authentic self and activate their greatest creative legacies. Her most powerful teachings are reminders of the deeper connection we all have with the greater wholeness of life. Cherie has spoken alongside some of the top surgeons, engineers, and technology experts in the world. She has played a guest role in the Lionsgate movie Wander Darkly and has been a featured guest on the Dr. Oz show and Megyn Kelly Today. Cherie has also been featured on ABC, NHK Japan, Forbes, NASDAQ, and Inc. This episode is a deep one. We go into a conversation that most people aren't daring to go into. So buckle up, family. This is going to be good. Now, remember, before we go any further, if you dig this episode, please drop a rating and review on iTunes and download a few episodes to help me get this podcast out to more leaders around the world. You can also text hashtag potent truth to 1-781-336-0160 to start receiving weekly potent truth straight to your phone. And again, don't forget to grab a copy of my book, Potent Leadership. It's available on Amazon and Audible. And now finally, let us drop in to a deep and insightful conversation to help you understand the shadows from different timelines with my dear sister, Cherie Aimée. Beyond the narrative, underneath the veil of illusion, and deep within your center, therein lies potent truth. Welcome to Potent Truth, where today's leaders, change makers, and light carriers come together to question the narrative, arrive at potent truth, and lead with sovereignty. What is potency? It's who you are beneath the masks, facades, and protective gear. It's the medicine humanity yearns for, cries out for, prays for, and needs. Your potency is what sets you apart, magnetizes your following, and creates movements. Join me, Ruby Fremon, for weekly guidance, channeled messages, and potent conversations that will take you on a journey of self-discovery. I am here to guide you to a place of unraveling the programming that's been keeping us stuck for generations, unlocking potent truth and expressing it through sovereign leadership. It's time for change. It's time for potent truth. Hey, leaders, welcome to another episode of Potent Truth. And in today's episode, I have a returning guest. She was featured in episode 237 entitled Uncovering Your True Purpose During a Time of Great Uncertainty. And that episode was pure gold. Today's episode is going to be no different. If anything, we're probably going to go way deeper than this and into a very important discussion, especially for these times. Cherie, thank you so much for being a guest on the show twice, for coming back, and for your willingness to dive into this topic, which I think you and I feel not enough people are talking about right now. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm super excited to just drop in.
Welcome. Thank you, Ruby. Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. It is so exciting to be back on your podcast. Thank you for inviting me on. And I just cannot wait to dive in because a lot has happened even since the last time I was on here.
Oh my God. So I had to check to see when you were on here because it felt like forever. And then I realized, oh, it really wasn't that long ago. It's just the timelines that we're moving through right now. And also you and I have been, along with so many people in humanity, have been navigating a lot too regarding these timelines and this juncture in humanity that has everything to do with the energetics in our collective. So I would love to start because I feel like everyone can listen. Everyone can go back and listen to episode 237 and learn more about Cherie and her story and all that good stuff. I'd really like for us to just dive right into this. So how about we start here? How about we start with what you've been feeling in the energetic realm since our last discussion and what you ended up shifting due to what you uncovered.
Yeah. We are going there, folks. Yeah. So the last time I was on, I know I was in my own kind of in between stage. Like I knew for a while, for a few years, that things were getting ready to shift drastically. In fact, I think I mentioned even on the other episode that I had started sensing it in the work that I was doing in technology. I was sensing that a lot of what we are actually starting to see unfold in the last couple of weeks. And I just remember a few years ago kind of like raising the flag, like, hey, I think we need to start paying attention to this, this storm coming. And everyone kind of looked at me like I had 10 heads. They just, I had stumbled upon something that we really weren't in the midst of dealing with at the time. And so a lot of times when you are able to foresee something, it can be very hard with those around you that don't see the same thing, or they don't see the urgency of what it is that you see. And a lot of what I was seeing was actually reported in some of the data that I was looking at. So I was working for a company doing advisory, and I was studying data ethics. So I was researching data, I was researching artificial intelligence, and really, I knew data was like the new oil, okay? Like we see it now, like now data has become a big conversation, but this was like right before, everyday people really understood the impact of privacy, data, and freedom of speech. So, and I'm talking like prior to, 2020. So this was like around 2018. And so the data was just showing, like, for me, this impending storm. And so on the last podcast, where I was when we discussed the current events at that time, I was really in the midst of finding myself caught between two worlds, really. And that was like this world of the pandemic, right? And everything that was unfolding and everything that people were really starting to deal with, right? Um, and then I'm still seeing this forecast that's a few years away, right? And I didn't know timing wise. I just knew I could see instantly this like kind of domino effect that was building. And so personally and professionally, I was really in a pivotal moment of trying to figure out what path I was going to go down, right? Was I going to really continue down this road of walking the path of data ethics and kind of being this standalone person that's like raising the flag of something I saw coming, or was I going to just allow humanity time to experience events as they unfold? And that's kind of where this overlap of a lot of the work that I do, it seems to be this overlap between like science, tech, and spirituality, right? So it's kind of like I was reaching this point of like, what is my role here? What is my role on the planet right now as humanity is starting to begin, this was 2020, begin the process of something that I knew was going to keep unfolding into something even bigger than the pandemic? What is my role in that? Right? Which is a very, very big question for so many of us right now. Is my role to like beat it down over your head day after day? There's a storm coming, there's a storm coming. Or do I allow you to trust in the everyday unfoldment of life and deal with events as they come? And I know a lot of us were kind of stuck in this same position of not knowing what to say about some things that we were finding, about some medical choices that we had to make. And, there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of tug and clashes between mindsets. And so, that weighed on my soul. I'll just be honest. It weighed on my soul. And I think I mentioned there was, some months where I really struggled to even get out of bed because I know the power of the human spirit. I know what we are capable of creating for our lives. And that ties into this amazing near-death experience that I had over 10 years ago, where I really got to see like the pure human soul and what we are able to do when I crossed over. And so I have this very, very powerful belief, sometimes a very stubborn belief, like, look, we can do this. Like, here's what's going on. And believe it. And then let's just shift timelines. Like, let's create this better world now. We have the power to stop this. And that part of me started to realize like, whoa, I need to take a step back because it's actually giving me anxiety. It's giving me a lot of people, clapping back at me. It's stressing me out. I'm not sleeping. And so that kind of builds up to what we're talking about today, which is really, about navigating that road of really even knowing what your role is in this time in human civilization, human history, where we're at a pivotal junction where life as we know it is changing, right? It's not going back to the world we were used to. And so it's taken me many, many months to truly make sense of what my role is during this time, and to actually go in and clear my own subconscious blocks and traumas and limiting beliefs to even unravel from what I was going through. So that's pretty much what I've been working through since the last time that we spoke, is really truly understanding, okay, like, yes, there's this information coming, but maybe your role is something different than to tell people there's a storm coming.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think there's a lot of people listening that can probably relate, as in they're in that place now, right? I found, for me, and most of our listeners know this, but the beginning of 2020, I held completely different belief systems. And then things started crumbling as the narrative continued to get pushed. And by summer of 2020, I completely, my entire belief paradigm was flipped on its head, and I started to see right through the matrix and the illusions. And that's when I started to really get loud and speak up.
Mhm.
But by 2021, I was feeling the same. Like, I was feeling anxiety brewing. I didn't want to admit it, but I was feeling it. And it started to feel really depleting. Whereas at the beginning, it started to feel energizing because I was like, okay, I'm part of this movement that's going to help people see. And then I started to realize, oh, wait, people have to open their own eyes in order to see. That is not my job. And if anything, it's actually depleting my energy. And I started getting a lot of things thrown back at me, which sucked my energy. And it would feel, it was almost like this sticky residual energetic, where normally it would be easy for me to shake things off. But in these situations, it kind of stuck. And I realized towards the end of 2021 that I needed to shift things. And it was a conversation with you where you had said that exact thing of like understanding your role during this time. And I was like, yeah, what is my role? And it dropped in immediately. It's like I knew unconsciously what my role is. My role is clearly to work with these leaders of humanity who have a vision for a new world, who want to pave the path. That's my role. And so a lot of that work is behind the scenes. It's not so much in the scene. It's not so much on the scene. It's not so much rah and sharing tons of information, because I strongly believe that if someone wants the information, they'll go find it. So that began to shift the way I show up online. It began to shift the way I was showing up in person. It was like I was able to just understand fully what I give a fuck about, what I don't give a fuck about. I should say, like, it was really easy for me to see that. And as I start to drop into that energetic, that's when I started to notice something really wacky going on in the online space. Like, it was like, as I start to step away and become more of an observer than being wrapped up in the polarity war, I started to notice the behavior of people and how there was just this weird energetics being thrown around left, right, and center that felt really off and misaligned and attacking and manipulative, but from leaders, like people who call themselves, and I'm not talking about political leaders, I'm just talking about within our industries of personal development, spiritual development, within those fields. And that was such an eye opener for me, because that's when I realized, holy shit, none of us are really like innocent from this. We all can get swept up in the, let's call it the ominous energetics that are at play behind the scene. And we can get swept up in it without the awareness of it happening. And so that's when I really started to practice deep discernment, deeply honoring my boundaries. I already considered myself the boundary queen, but I was like, no, like I am holding this boundary. If I'm going to trust my gut, no more questioning anything, creating more space for myself, more solitude. And that's what 2022 has been. So this is what I really want to dive into, because I feel like there's a lot of people who are noticing this, just the feeling of it, but we're not discussing it enough. And it feels to me, and I'd love to hear your perspective, but this almost feels like the more important battle that we need to be aware of, that's running in the background. And that's the darker energies that are at play behind the scenes, feeding off of our polarization and duality.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something that I became aware of more in towards mid 2021, which was that, you know, it's really all about like this deep understanding of time, space, and frequency. That's basically what it is. All right, let's just go there, people. But it really is because, um, and this has to do with like understanding how the matrix is run. So, in short, I mean, the matrix is pretty much run based on energetics, right? So, are we in this state of like love or fear? And for the most part, humanity has been lured into this state of fear. Even when you think you're like happy, most of the time, whatever you're doing is still coming from this place of fear if you don't really understand how the matrix has been architected, right? So there's like frequency and energetics, right? So it's really like love or fear. Okay, we can dive deeper into this because those are just terms right now. And then there's, and then it's kind of like is space, right? So like, what is making up your space? What, like the language, the words you use, the environment you're around, the audio you are hearing, right? Are you one of those people that spends a little bit too much time tuned into the news and global events and kind of getting swept up away in that, or do you tend to stay more in your like current visible reality? Then we've got like the virtual world, and then there's like the physical world of your everyday life. And with the launch of social media, so many of our worlds are also in this virtual realm, right? Which is a whole other level of space that you are existing in. It's a whole other consciousness that is very different from having somebody like physically in your presence. We're so used to it now that we don't really think much of it, right? But if you're a deep thinker like I am, I'm always thinking about these things and thinking about these different realms that we are constantly interacting with. There's some realms you can see, the physical realm, the virtual realm, and then there's the unseen realm. Okay, that's a whole other party. So space is also, and what goes on in that space in these different realms is also architecting the matrix, right? The foundational conditions of how you see and operate in life. And then there's time. And time is really interesting because time, and I learned this in when I crossed over my near-death experience, but time is not linear the way we think it is. It's more of like a circular spiral. So a lot of times, time is such an interesting thing to explain, but in so many words, there's multiple timelines always happening at once, right? That's why sometimes you can have war break out and some people are still dancing around on TikTok like nothing has happened, right? Like nothing has changed. Like the world did not just experience a pandemic. They've never once said anything about the pandemic, and they're still dancing their way through, World War III breaking out. Okay. So that is one timeline that somebody is operating on. You have another timeline where somebody is really a sensitive empath and they're really taking on the energetic frequencies of and the pain and suffering of the global world. They see everything and they feel the tension and the energy. And so they might be struggling to get out of bed, or they might be going to work every day very, very stressed, or they may be trying to run their business, but things are just not happening to them because their energy is leaking, right? There's distractions, their focus is kind of all over the place. That's a whole other timeline playing out. And then you've got the timeline of people experiencing the war on a physical level, experiencing being displaced, experiencing food shortages, or whatever the issues that arise are. That's a whole other timeline. And so we live in a world where people are experiencing all different types of things, and we each have our own different perspective and our own history, personal history, that really dictates how you see and feel the world. So with all of that said, you have to be very, very mindful of your personal energetic frequency always. And it's not something you were taught in school. You weren't taught this in college, but this is something that is very, very critical for every human on this planet to understand that we are each energetic frequencies. We are each our own we are our own individual universe. Okay. And so when we are walking through the world and we are getting caught off guard by all these other timelines going on, that starts to split our energy, our focus, our frequency, and it starts to deplete the nourishment of your own universal world that is the human body, right? And so again, this goes very, very, we can keep going deeper and deeper, but the human vessel this is the power that I was talking about. This is the individual power that each of us as a human being, a spiritual being in a human vessel actually possesses on the cellular level. We have the ability to create our world, to create our reality. I truly, truly believe that. But when you are living conditioned since birth to not understand your true capabilities, to not understand who you are as an energetic being, then you are constantly conditioned to walk through the world almost numb to your own sacredness, numb to your own divinity. And then you get caught up in other people's timelines, in other people's energy, and in other institutional space, bubbles, I call them. They really are space bubbles. So you have to be very, very, this has to be a daily practice. You have to start to learn the power and the frequency of the innate human intelligence. You as an individual, not who you were conditioned to know yourself as you were growing up. Because once you start learning the power of the natural innate human intelligence, you will realize why you get caught up in this whirlwind of overlapping energies, timelines, and spatial realities. Okay, they're all just taking your soul and splitting it in each of those three different areas, and it's leaving your energetics completely depleted. Okay, because you're no longer in congruence, you're no longer in the wholeness of your innate natural power. And so when we start diving in a little bit more about how to navigate these times and what's actually happening to us, that's kind of a visual of what's happening as you're walking around. And we just heard that Fukushima in Japan just had a 7.3 earthquake, right? So you see how quickly our attention can just, and just be drawn, just split right out of us onto that. And what's happening is we are moving into a spatial realm that is causing the time and the space and the frequencies to all accelerate. Like as a whole, as this planet moves through the cosmos, everything is accelerating. So we're going to feel it in our bodies. So you have to know how to harness your sacred energy. You have to understand the human vessel. Like, this is not a luxury. This is not something for just spiritual people anymore. It doesn't matter who you are on the planet. If you want to make it through these next few years, okay, this is a absolute necessity. And the signs, like you had said earlier, number one sign is that you're feeling depleted, right? You're feeling anxious, you're having trouble sleeping at night, you're having nightmares, like whatever it is. I've had all of those things, right? And it took me a very, very long time to understand what was actually happening. And speaking from experience, this is what I did. I had to start really understanding, not just, oh, okay, I crossed over, soul never dies, there's an afterlife. No. I needed to understand now, what is the human relationship to being on this planet and the spiritual world? Mm-hmm. We can't forget about our physical reality. And I think sometimes when life gets tough, we kind of like to escape into the spiritual world because we never learned how to ground into our bodies and to face unpleasant feelings while still in our body.
Wow, there's so much in what you just shared that I want to unpack. Because I want everyone listening to really get clear on this. What's interesting to me is when you were just talking about the different realms, we've got the physical realm, the virtual realm, then the unseen realm. Like, I am very familiar with the unseen realm because of the plant medicine spaces that I've been in. Mm-hmm. And when you're in a plant medicine space under psychedelics, especially ayahuasca or something like Bufo, I mean, they each kind of tap into a different unseen energy, where like Bufo taps into more of the God energy and ayahuasca can go in all different directions. Mm-hmm. That working with plant medicine in that way really helped me see and recognize the unseen and how it's always there. What I feel I wasn't super consciously aware of was how much of that impacts us on a daily basis, and especially today. And the visual I have, because I'm such a visual person, is I see these like bubbles all over the world, these bubbles, and like every human being has bubbles around them, and you kind of like go in and out of all these different bubbles, these different realms. And people can also bring you into their bubbles. The media can bring you into their bubbles, what you were saying about Fukushima, like you can go into that bubble and be in that bubble, and all of a sudden the anchored feeling that you had within your body is gone, nowhere to be found. And I feel that this is what's taking, for me, sovereignty to that next level, to the realest of real levels. I think sovereignty is just something that people keep talking about and throwing around, but no one's really anchoring into what that means. And for me, it means like being so rooted in your truth that you can be aware of the bubbles without being sucked into them. And that's been my personal journey over the past, I would say like 7 or 8 months, of being that anchor for myself, of being able to see something on social media and not have my energy sucked into it, of receiving comments or feedback or whatever and not being sucked into it, of recognizing something in the unseen and not being sucked into it. And that to me is the real work, because I feel like that is so much of the battle that we're all in, that most people aren't even seeing and don't even recognize, right? And if we talk about the idea of duality and good and evil, I'm gonna go there right now. I feel like we have to. I feel like this is just kind of goes along with it. But the evil, darker entity like forces really feed off of our weakness, off of our fear, which is why there's so much pressure put on society to remain in this state of fear. And I loved how you said that some people can be, feeling joy, but what they don't realize is it's coming from a place of fear. And that's really important for us to acknowledge, because again, like none of us are bulletproof to this. We can just become more resilient and more aware. So if we look at some of the things that you and I have talked about behind the scenes and what we've noticed on the quote unquote scene, the online scene within personal and spiritual development scenes, we're starting to see things like, the example that comes to mind, and no judgment here, and like this is something we need to be aware of, but the rise of people channeling, for one thing. And I've always been open to the idea of channeling. I've been exposed to people channeling for a long time, and I always use my discernment, because to me, having the awareness of all these other realms, are you actually super clear on what you're channeling and from what realm? You can say galactic beings, you can say Syrians, you can say whatever else you've read about and people are talking about. And how do you know for certain? It's like, all I know for certain is this physical vessel in this 3D world that I am living in. That's what I know for certain. I can touch myself. I can feel, I understand this. But the unseen, that's like a barrel of monkeys. Like we don't know. So I'm curious to know, or I'd love for you to share more on what you've been noticing just within our spaces, and how people are consciously or unconsciously tapping into some of these energies or different realms. And then we can start moving into like what to do and solutions. Because listeners, we're not going to just leave you with like all the scary shit and not give you tools. The tools are coming.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is an interesting thing because I guess too, it depends. I will say this may actually depend a little bit on whether or not you see this. It could have something to do with experience or number of years you've kind of been on the planet. I only say that because I remember when spirituality was not an influencer market, right? So, it was kind of in the paradigm of like back in the day when people were healers, but they didn't really make very much money. So what I've seen is that something shifted over the course of a couple of years, and people are now making 7 figures and up being spiritual and being healers. Like that was unheard of years ago, right? Unless you were like Wayne Dyer or whatever, right? With like Hay House, mega publishing behind you. For me personally, I feel like it just exploded around the time of the pandemic. I don't know if that was just like the timeline I was in, but all of a sudden I just remember seeing so many people. Like my timeline was just flooded with everyone was becoming a channeler. Like they just left the financial, like Wall Street, and now they were just channeling. So I was very confused. I was just like, whoa, what's happening here? So I just was seeing a lot. And I'm very sensitive. I'm very sensitive to energies, and even more so, like it just grows every year. And I could almost feel the energy just being shoved onto social media as a means of wealth, like really fast wealth. I'm just sharing kind of what I felt and witnessed. It was just this sudden push. And I was like, what just happened? Did I just enter like this time like warp? And then I started kind of seeing as well that the new influencer model being promoted through like agencies were getting on the trend. So a lot of the spirituality, if you really looked deep enough, you would actually end up seeing they were all attached to full-blown agencies, right? So, an influencer agency, I don't know the details of how that all works or what gets done for you, or, but you've got a team. You've got a team of experts, you've got a lot of help, you've got focus, and you've got never ending supply of content. Like, and all you really, you're just the face of it. So, in a time where misinformation, disinformation, big data, privacy issues, freedom of speech, in a time, again, this is my tech background coming in, but I was starting to be like, whoa, there's a lot of things being hurled at humanity right now, like hurled, systematically hurled. And that to me is not coming from a space of divinity. And again, I'm talking about energetically, it doesn't feel it's coming from a place of divine, pure soul frequency embodiment. And I get that, there's a lot of new souls coming onto the planet, and they stay connected. They don't have as many of the blocks and the conditioning that those of us that have been on the planet a little bit longer in this lifetime. But I think this is where the discernment piece comes in. You really have to discern for yourself what energy is really pure and divine, and which energies are coming from an agenda. I think that's it's such a delicate line when you turn spirituality into a business. And, it's even something myself I've been struggling with, because I come with like years of knowledge in, like I said, in science, tech, and, even just the medical knowledge from everything I've personally had to go through to keep me alive, for years. And I think that I think we each, as a human being on the planet, need to start asking ourselves, what is my agenda here? So, like, when I share my near-death experience, my agenda was not money. And I think that will shock a lot of people, because I did so many things that I didn't monetize. I very easily could have monetized, and I just freaking didn't, because that I knew that my story wasn't my, I'm sharing a story, but the story is not me. Okay. So I felt humanity needed to really truly understand. And yes, the spiritual self-development industry, most people know this by now, but a lot of humans, walking the planet, don't understand. They don't know what happens to the soul after death. They don't understand the significance of what it means that you actually don't die. Like, what are your whole life changes when you know that, because you can't ever live life the same again. Okay, so this is not a little marketing thing for me. This is not a little like if there's one message I can get out, and my story just is so crazy that it can garner like multiple millions around the world to tune in just to hear that, like, I've fulfilled a mission and a promise that I made to myself and the divine, right? The divinity of life, upon being resuscitated. But that's not, there's no agenda behind that, other than I just felt humanity had the right to know that. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So when you start now, if I'm going to then take that knowledge, that business, and turn it into a business model, okay, it would be my responsibility to constantly be checking in with my integrity, my ethics. Who am I trying to serve? Am I trying to serve leaders in really understanding the impact of that knowledge, that particular knowledge, and how it needs to guide your own values and what type of work you put out in the world as a leader? Or is it, somebody going through stage 4 cancer, and they're terrified and their family's terrified? And maybe I need to price it so it's more accessible to those people. That's been my struggle, right? Is really understanding, where do I want to go with this from here? Because that is part of my story. Like most people don't even realize the whole heart part around my story. Um, so, you know, my point is that it's everything right now. We live in a world where everything is about money and success. Money and success, money and success. There's nothing wrong with that, but it does get a little tricky when you now have people channeling and in the same breath talking about how they're going to channel and make 7 figures and multiple millions. Something is misaligned, okay? Because when I crossed over, there was no money. Like, and I get people will say, but Cherie, we live in a physical reality and I need money. I get that. But once you start channeling for money and channeling to grow your business and claiming you are connected to the divine, there is a huge, huge responsibility that comes with that, because people are trusting their energetic frequency with you. They are trusting the timeline you're going to take them on. They are also trusting that you know what you're doing so that when you start channeling the divine and then all of a sudden their soul starts waking up and wanting to do things, and oh hey, but before we can really wake up and start making our millions, how about we look at this trauma first? And this happened to me, so I am speaking from experience. Does the spiritual teacher you are going to that claims they make tons of money, right? They get all types of people coming to them. They charge this and that for their spiritual wisdom. Yet you go on one of their courses, take one of their courses, and you are now sent immediately down a very, very dark hole. And you don't know what happened. You don't know who to turn to. And that leader is like, I can't help you unless, like, my one-on-ones are now 100,000. I can't help you with that. But you just put your channeling all over this person, right? And they trusted you, right? It's a sacred thing to channel. It's a sacred thing to connect with the divine. So I think what really happens is when you are not channeling these pure essence, these pure frequencies, you may be picking up some dark, dark stuff. And what the spiritual community is too afraid to talk about is that the unseen world has some dark stuff going on as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, really well said. And I think the distinction that is the most helpful was being able to discern which energies are really coming from pure heart, pure divine energy versus with an agenda.
Yes.
That felt really like a visceral difference for
Mhm.
me, because of course, like we also in this human world don't want to go back to the times of like being a martyr and now you just can't survive in this 3D plane. However, there is this depth of manipulation that's taking place that people are not aware of,
Mhm.
And I feel that we've been primed for this for a while, because for how long over the past 10 years, we've seen the emphasis be on growth, on scaling, on amplifying, on like bigger, better, stronger, faster. And I agree, there is this weird, like, I don't even know how to describe it, like an insurgence of people claiming to be in the spiritual realms, yet tapping into some really odd energies. And at a time when humanity is like at the weakest it's ever been,
Exactly.
right? Because 2020, the rug got pulled up from underneath everyone. And so people started going into fear, base mentality, fear entering their nervous systems, operating fight, flight, or freeze, trying to find anything to latch onto that helps them feel safe, right? That helps them feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was a very vulnerable time in humanity, a very vulnerable time. And it's easy to grasp onto people. And over the past 2 years, like we've just seen that worsening with the amount of news, media, wars, propaganda, manipulation tactics that are being, again, thrown onto humanity. And so it's weakening humanity even more, putting them in deeper states of fear, unrecognizable states of fear. And now comes the manipulative tactics that I honestly believe most of the people who are doing this type of work aren't even aware of it. They just get swept up in the energetic of it. Right. And the ego part of themselves is like, yes, money, I get to do money to serve. Like, I don't want to be a martyr. This is what I get to do. And yet, somewhere along the way, they've lost that divine connection and even the connection to their truth. And so it's coming from this misguided place and this place of, like you said, like there's an agenda. And I've noticed this in my own work. And I think I've shared with you behind the scenes how for so much of my career since 2014, it's been on the scene, up front and center. For anyone listening who's been following me since 2014, like I was posting 3 times a day, 1 video a day, YouTube, all the things, every single platform, you name it, I was there. I was doing live events, live workshops. I was everywhere. And after 2020, I really started to dig deep into like, well, this doesn't really feel meaningful. Like, I feel like I'm getting wrapped up in something that I don't actually really want. And when I started uncovering the timelines, realizing it's a different timeline that I had energetically tapped into. But what's my timeline? Where am I at? And it's going back to what I said at the beginning of this episode. Like, what is my role? Well, my role is to really serve the leaders of this new earth. Like, that's what it is. And a lot of that's going to happen behind the scenes. I don't have to be as loud about that. I'm super confident in the work that I do. I don't need to yell about it, preach about it, share about it all the time. I don't need to be everywhere all at once. And it's really taxing on my energy. And in the very human language of success and our human understanding, I am successful and I am not greedy. And there's no agenda. It comes from a place of servitude and continuing to anchor myself back into that place has been my saving grace, because it also feels really good to show up in the world from this energetic frequency. Whereas so many people that I'm seeing online, so many leaders, the only word I can use to describe how I'm seeing it is like they're flailing, like they're just flailing. They're trying this, they're trying that. They're still doing the rah thing, showing up in really big ways without really anchoring into what's true for them, what's most meaningful to them, what is their unique timeline that they want to operate in, versus let me try this one, let me try this one, let me try this one, all as an attempt to calm the fear that they may or may not be aware of that resides within them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will definitely say from personal experience, as someone who has been through cancer, cardiac arrest, has been in a coma for 4 months, has lived on a bionic heart for 5 years, and then had a heart transplant. Okay, this is going to sound very bizarre, but the trauma of that experience did not hit me until 2020. Okay, and this was 12 years ago, or 10 years prior to the pandemic. So what that means. Okay. And this is a really hard share because it's made me question a lot of things within myself. Okay. And this is the inner work. This is the inner work that humanity is just being called to do right now. I honestly did not realize how much trauma was stored in my body from, what I just listed sounds like a lot, right? I had no awareness that it was in my body for 10 years. And I was all over social media. I've been on national television. I've been in movies. I had no awareness, none. So I know that you can be prancing around, happy as can be, living your best life, and have just beneath the surface so much trauma that dates all the way back from like childhood and prior. And you could literally have no freaking idea. And so the work that I've been doing to manage everything I've shared today, from these influencer agency driven content online, the need to feel like I have to keep claiming my worth and shouting online that I'm here, and like all of that shifted for me because, like you said, I realized, number one, I've just done like a million laps around all of those health issues I just talked about. Like, first of all, okay, people don't die, have chest compressions, CPR, lifelong disability, chemotherapy for half a year, like a heart transplant, my ribs feel like they're broken every day. Like, you're not going to see people very heavily injured from medicine doing what I've done the past couple of years. You just won't hear about us. All right. So I absolutely do not regret anything I did. And in fact, I know now there's no way I could have done what I've done if this much trauma had come up at once. So number one, our bodies do work overtime to protect us. But at some point, we have to face deeper shit. And I am blessed enough where I've been able to take time off and to recognize and learn more about my physical body here on earth, and to tell my story as well from a very grounded place. I got to spend 5 years talking about the after realm and spirituality and love and expansion and all of these beautiful things. And it's now time for me to talk about what it means to bring that beauty down here on earth. And the method is through the body. We've got to learn how to come back home into our bodies. And I'll tell you again, I had no clue I was outside of my body all these years. Because, one of the things that happens when you die, when you flatline, and you're in a coma, like your body, your brain will block out what happened to you, right? So I have selected amnesia that started to show itself more as more time went on. But And so when those memories come back in, I'm like, oh my God, like that's right. I went through that. I forgot about that. So our body has an incredible way of trying to protect us. It thinks it's protecting us, right? Because your nervous system can only handle so much at once. And it's the same with this pandemic. It's no different. If you danced your way through this pandemic and you continue to dance your way as more and more people around the globe are dying, you may think you're being strong, but there will come a point where your soul is going to make you face what is happening to humanity on both an individual and a collective level. And it won't be fun, right? But I can tell you this, there are so many more tools and support systems and methods of healing and integration out now than there were when I first died. So many more. I did not have the help back then that I do literally today. Like I am in tears at the amount of support I have now to support me being back inside my body, a body that went through a lot of trauma and tried as a visionary leader to just keep on going. There's Cherie. She's resilient. She doesn't stop. And yeah, it was beautiful. I built a whole new life for myself. I mean, who knew, right? But it's time. And the question I really want people to ask themselves is tune into your body, close your eyes. What is your body asking of you right now? And sometimes you'll even be saying it, but then you push it down. But it might be that your body is asking you to slow down long enough where you can actually ask it what is really going on. How do I really feel about, what's happening in the planet? And is it going to, how is it really affecting me? Because the more we can allow ourselves to create that daily practice of stillness and presence in the body, which can be so hard as a thought leader, as a visionary leader, boy, like I've been like this my whole life. Just go, create, like achieve. I've been like that my whole life. So I know how hard it is to just freaking slow down. Well, eventually your body will just make you slow down, or you can choose to slow down. And, I think like you talked about with all of these energies and some of these dark frequencies, playing their role right now on the planet, they are very, very real and they're very, very powerful. And there's only one way to minimize their impact on you or remove them completely. There's only one way, and that is coming back into your body. Like they are not going to be able to get rid of these energies by pointing out everything that's going on or being triggered all over the internet. It's going to come from a better understanding of that trauma has been inflicted on humanity. Okay, it's been inflicted our whole lives. We just didn't see it, but now it's really visible. It's really, really visible. The manipulation, the media, the agencies behind pulling strings, like it goes deep. It goes real deep, right? That manipulation goes deeper than most people want to actually acknowledge. Okay, because what would happen if I acknowledge that these entities, these forces, these institutions don't have my best interest at heart? What would that mean for how I now need to operate in life?
Mm-hmm.
What responsibility do I now have to take over my body, my sovereignty, if I can no longer actually place some of my energy over? They'll handle it. These people will handle it. Okay, like the financial system, it'll bounce back like it does every other time because they'll handle it. That's not sovereignty. That's not sovereignty. You can say you're sovereign because you're a multimillionaire. If your multi-millions is held up in a system that's coming down, right? Just how sovereign are you? Right? Are you going to be able to manage as the world continues to shift? Or are you just kind of biting your tongue and dancing around? I'm using that as an analogy, but are you thinking everything's okay, everything's okay, everything's okay until it's not? Right? So the best thing we can all do is to start cultivating more of that presence, start learning about what it really means to come back into your body, and making sure that that is a part of your daily practice every single day, because the world is shifting. And while I truly believe it's a beautiful thing, right? Because I know where we're going to end up, and if you study some of the ancient religions and teachings, they'll tell you, we are shifting into a golden age, but there's a lot we need to go through to get there. Right? So take care of your self-care, attune to your body, learn how to have a conversation with your body every single day, and keep your energy sacred.
Mm. So important. And might I also add, listen to your body and trust what your body is telling you, because your body is constantly sending you signals when things feel aligned and when they don't feel aligned. And it's so important for us to really listen and tune in and trust the signals that are being sent. So good. And to those of you thinking like, okay, well, these are the tools to get back into my body. I mean, yes. You would be amazed the amount of people that I work with, how many of them are so out of body, and don't even recognize it. And I've been there. And it's why I absolutely love being in my body. I love being in my body. The moment I start flying out of my body, I feel deeply uncomfortable because I've completely flipped that sense of normalcy for myself. And when we start to cultivate that sense of safety and trust within our physical vessels, we operate in the world differently, because then we become our own guiding posts. That's what we're talking about here. So Cherie, I mean, I feel like, again, I said this on the last episode, we could talk for hours, and we're like way beyond over time. So let's leave our listeners with one potent truth. That's one potent truth you want them to really anchor into.
Yeah, I would say understand the power of a healthy, regulated nervous system, and know that you have the control and the power to create that for yourself. And if you think you're all perfect and you don't have to look into that, I would say be open to learn, at least learning more about nervous system regulation, especially during this time of such great, revelations and transformations.
So important. Thank you. Thank you so much for being who you be in this world, for being so devoted to your own journey, and for the work that you're now doing. The work that you've really just evolved into, because it's not a complete different direction. It's an evolution of who you are. And I see it as like a true alchemy of all of your backgrounds. All the different sectors that you've worked in have now come to this intersection of like, and here is my divine work. And so I love that. For those of you listening, all of Cherie's links are in the show notes if you want to learn more about Cherie, how to work with her offerings. And she's got some really great messages, meditations on YouTube if you want to sink more into her frequency. Cherie, I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for just being such an amazing sister to me in this lifetime, during this time. Felt like it took forever for us to like really connect, but now we're like in it. And I love it.
You too. I know. I love you too. It's been such an honor. And oh, I just love being here on your podcast. It's such an amazing podcast. I know you've worked so hard to build it to where it is today. So it's truly an honor to be here, and your audience is amazing. And so thank you for letting me share. And yeah, sending so much love out to everybody out there today, all over the world, just sending you so much love.
Thank you. And to our listeners, of course, like, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Potent Truth, where we're taking you on a journey to challenge illusion and lead with sovereignty. Please be sure to connect with me and Cherie outside of this podcast. Our links to our social media and our websites are in the show notes. Make sure you drop a rating and review and share this episode with a friend. If you found it insightful in any way, please share it with a friend. And then make sure you check back on Monday for a brand new episode of Potent Truth. Aho, family.